Hey y'all, what's going on? It's your favorite big boy, Big Stu, back with another video for GEFITT. Now, before I hop into today's video, again, hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can be notified anytime I drop any content. Now, before we hop into today's video, I think it's important for me to take y'all to church. Now that we set the scene, I think it's about time to hop in the topic of today's video. In today's video, we're going to specifically talk about my struggle with my faith and with Christianity. So, just a reminder, I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is part of the Bible Belt, with some people saying that Oklahoma City, which is about an hour and a half drive south of Tulsa, is to some considered the buckle of the Bible Belt. So now, growing up in the Bible Belt, church is king. Like, pretty much growing up here, and I would assume growing up in the South in general, there's a church on, it seems like, every corner of every city. There's a church everywhere. Like, you can't drive more than 3 or 4 blocks without running into a church. It may be a small church, it may be a big church, it may be a church that has 20 members, it may be a church that has thousands of members, but seems like there's a church on every corner. So growing up here, faith in church is a big part of, for the most part, everybody's existence. I can specifically speak on my behalf and say church was a big part of my life. Now, it probably wasn't as big for me as it was for other people. You know, you hear some people talk about their church experience growing up, and they lived in the church. For me, that wasn't the case. For some people, like, they in church Sunday morning for Bible study, service, choir rehearsal, and then evening service. Then they might be in church throughout the week for whatever church ministry. Then they may be on Wednesday, Bible study. Then on Saturday, they might be at the nursing homes, singing and just visiting the nursing homes. Like, they pretty much live in the church. That wasn't necessarily my experience. Growing up in a single parent household, my mom, she tried to take us to church as much as she could. But me being super active in sports, specifically AAU basketball, like, a lot of Sundays I wasn't even in town. I might be in the road. I might be in Texas. I might be in Missouri. I might be in Las Vegas. Like, I might be on the road for AAU tournament. And then even though I was here, like, we may have a local AAU tournament in which we played on Sunday. So, like, there's a lot of times where I wouldn't attend church for, months and weeks on end. But when we could go, for the most part, we did go. There is a few exceptions of, if my mom, single parent, pretty much working as much overtime as she could to keep the lights on and the bills paid, she may just be worn out by the time Sunday came around, and she might have just been like, you know what, I'm not going to church, and we're not going to church this week. But other than that, for the most part, we went. And this is just a side story, but the one thing that used to, like, really get on my nerves, and it happened every now and then, was there would be Sundays in which, as a kid, you stand up all Saturday night playing video games. Like, that's just what you do on the weekends. But so, like, my mom would have her alarm set for Sunday to get up on early Sunday to maybe make us breakfast and get us all ready to go to church. And every now and then, because she's working so hard to provide, like, she would oversleep. Maybe her alarm didn't go off or she didn't set it. It would be something like that. And so she's in a rush getting us up, and she's behind. So she got to hurry up and get our clothes ironed and get us ready to go and get herself ready to go. And so, like, we would be dragging, being sluggish because we just woke up. And every now and then she'll like spaz out and be like, this ain't nothing but the devil this morning. And I used to take it personal because it would be like, okay, are you referring to your alarm not going off? Are you referring to us moving slow? Because are you referring to us as like working on the devil's behalf? Because if you are, like, what's going on with that? That's just how I took it as a kid. Now I know that she didn't mean it that way, but as a kid, I used to kind of rub me the wrong way. Now that's a side story. So back to the main story. So I grew up going to church as much as I could. Every now and then we'd go on Wednesday. And so I had a very good understanding of Christianity, on who God was and what he meant to me and to just everyone around me. And I did enjoy going to church as a kid. I'm not going to front. I enjoyed going to church. I didn't hate it. And, but the thing about it is that when you're a kid, for the most part, and I can at least speak on for myself, I didn't have a faith of my own. I didn't have a relationship with God of my own. It was all solely based on my mom's relationship with God. Because if I'm keeping it a buck, and it would showcase itself later on in life when I went to college, if I didn't have my mom taking me to go to church, then I probably just wouldn't have went. I would have been perfectly fine waking up Sunday morning watching cartoons or, playing video games or just sleeping in on Sundays. Like, I would have been perfectly fine with that. But, my mom, it was important for her to maintain her relationship with God, but also to instill that faith within us. And so I went because she made us go. So you fast forward years later, when I go off to college, I go off to a small school in Kansas. And it actually is I believe it was a Methodist church. It's sad because I didn't even realize that till I had graduated. Because like we had chapel when I went to college, but it wasn't like mandatory. Like every now and then, our coach would, I guess, make us go as a team bonding experience, or just to go to show our faces. But other than that, like we weren't first to go from our coaching staff, because I played college ball, basketball, and we weren't forced to go by the school. Like my wife went to OBU, and like they had to go to chapel a certain amount of times a semester. We didn't have that stipulation. And so I can literally count on one hand the amount of times I went to church there when I was down there. Like I said earlier, like the only reason why, for the most part, I went to church when I was younger was because I was forced to go. And so when I get off to college, I'm not forced to go, so I'm just not going. I still, like, at the same token, like, I still somebody who tries to move with a lot of morals and principles and dignity and hold myself to a high moral standard. And most of that has to do with I still believe in God, and I'm never really not believed in God. It's just that I struggle with being a Christian at times. And I'll get into that a little bit later. And so I would go through these spells where, I'm questioning Christianity, I'm questioning my faith and all of this. And then every now and then, it would feel like God was sending me a reminder of, who he is, and that he still reigns supreme, and that I need to get back in order and grow back into a relationship with him. And that was no more evident than certain times in college and just in life in general. I can at times have episodes of depression. Never been clinically diagnosed. Never even been looked to be clinically diagnosed. I don't think I would be, even if I went to go see if that was the case. I'll just every now and then have these episodes, dark episodes with depression, mainly with questioning my value on this planet or in life in general. And so I'll get into these modes where I would have these thoughts of like, if I passed away, nobody would care. Nobody's life would be affected. Everybody would just pretty much go on with life with no hiccups. Like, that's how insignificant I felt my life was. And I would have these moments and get really down and dark, have these dark thoughts and get really down on myself and get down in life in general. And then every now and then, like, it would seem like God out of the blue would just send a message to say, hey, you're all right, and get out of that funk. And one time I recall I was going to the school caf about to eat. There's people all around me, and I feel totally alone, even in the midst of, my peers. And so I walk into the caf and I'm down, and then out of the blue, I get my phone starts going off, and it's my cousin who, at that time, who's one of my closest cousins who was born 3 days after I am, and he's calling me out the blue. I hadn't talked to him in months, and he just like, the first thing he says, the first thing that comes out of his mouth was, I love you. Now, as a man, we don't really say we love each other that often, but he just said that out of the blue. Like, first thing that came out of his mouth. And like, it was like a rush of fresh energy and fresh life just took over me. And immediately, like, I went from having a really, really distraught or slumped shoulders to boom, like, my shoulders lifted. I felt a sense of peace and a sense of, everything is going to be all right. Yeah, you're going through whatever you're going through. This is just an episode. Like, everything is going to be all right. And so that was just pretty much, and it still happens, not as often because I don't question my faith as much, but that would happen periodically whenever something like that would happen all the time. And so that was my struggle in college. And I remember another story. This was like right before I graduated. Like, this might have been days before I graduated. And a lot of it had to do with the uncertainty of just my whole life in general. Like, I didn't have a job set up for when I left school. I didn't do internships. So like, there was a lot of uncertainty in my life in general. And so I was, questioning a lot of things. And this was when I was really questioning Christianity. Just, it could be small, it could be things of like, just, I remember going to the school chaplain, and being like, and just, berating her with a whole bunch of questions. Like, if somebody, as philosophical as like, if somebody grew up in the middle of nowhere in a country so far, far away, like, are they going to go to hell just because they didn't learn about God and Christianity? It could be anything of like, if somebody is gay, but like, they do amazing work, they do great things, if you look at their life outside of their sexuality, then they will look exactly how God would want us to look. But just because they're gay, are they going to hell? So it would just be like questions of that nature. And those are things that I've always struggled with. And so I graduated college, and I come back home, and I'm struggling finding work, struggling getting a place of my own, things of that nature. And during this whole time period, again, there's nobody forcing me to go to church, so I'm not going. I'm just not going. And that pretty much was the way of life for a long time, pretty much until I met my wife. At the time, she was my girlfriend. For probably at least about 6 months or a year, she was off in college when I was back home. So like, it wasn't a big deal that I wasn't going to church because she wasn't there to, I'm not saying make me go to church, but to motivate me to go to church. It wasn't until she moved back home and she was coming to visit me like every weekend for the most part. That one time I remember specifically, like, she got really upset because it wasn't even so much that I wasn't going, it was that I wasn't even putting an effort to go. And that was part of, when we started dating, because we met online. Part of my profile and stuff was talking about how, my faith is a big part of who I am. And so I wasn't holding myself to the standard in which I had set for myself, let alone any standard that she had for her potential spouse. And so at that point, I put on my big boy pants and acknowledged, hey, I'm not holding my end of the bargain. And so we searched for a church family, and eventually we found one with Battle Creek Church. And pretty much, I've been in church and active in church ever since then. But more importantly, because oftentimes as Christians, we can get very lackadaisical in the sense of we believe our relationship with God is just simply improved by just attending church service. That's the bare minimum that we'll do, is we'll just go to church, maybe serve in some type of ministry, but for the most part, it'll be like, I went to church, so then I'm good. And the older I've gotten, I feel like the more wisdom I've obtained, I've realized like your relationship with God can only be strengthened by what you do outside of the church. How often are you in the Word? How often do you pray? And the last couple of years, I've been trying my best to gain a stronger relationship with God. And a lot of it has to do with, my pops would say the Bible stands for believers' instructions before leaving earth. And that's just kind of how I take it, is like, there's things in the Bible that would just help my day to day, let alone help me become a better Christian. And oftentimes, like, I have conversations with my mom or with my wife, and I say, because I'm not that type of person who, if you're a non-Christian, I'm just on your head. Like, I'm not going to feel the obligation to force my beliefs down your throat. Like, if you ask me about my faith or we're talking about anything, then I may bring up God and the church, because that's just a part of who I am. But I'm not going to be like pushing it down your throat. I just don't feel like that's a productive or good way of spreading the word. That's just my personal belief. But so, and I forgot where I was going with that brain fart. But like, yeah, that's just not my thing. But for those who people are not Christians, for me, a lot of times it's just a matter of the Bible has great insight whether you're a Christian or not. One of my favorite books in the Bible is Solomon, and my bad, Psalms, because that's just practical wisdom that you can use in your everyday life. And so that's oftentimes the way I approach it with non-Christians is just look at this. Like, is this true? Then okay, the Bible has, even if you don't believe in all the miracles, the Bible has some precedence in life in general. And so as I've grown and gotten older, it's just like certain things in the Bible that I learned when I was a kid that kind of just went in one ear and out the other. Now it's starting to manifest in ways in which it just makes it evident that God is real. At least that's just for me. And that it's just certain little things, you know. And so now I'm just on a mission of growing stronger and stronger in my faith each and every day, as much as I can each and every day, taking it day by day, reading the Bible, praying as much as I can, just because I feel like I'm a better person with Christ than I am without him. And that's just simple for me. And that's just like my mentality right now is just to grow each and every day. And spiritual growth is most likely for me, is the most important kind of growth. Because I feel like with spiritual growth, everything else falls into place, physically and mentally. So yeah, that's kind of been my journey with Christianity and with faith. It hasn't always been peachy. It hasn't always been on the straight line and the straight and narrow. I've stepped off the path numerous of times, and I can't say that in the future I won't. I think it's important as Christians that we be not judgmental for those who have fallen off the path, because we all do. You know, just some of us don't admit to it. I have many of times, you know, and it's just about getting back on track as fast as possible. So yeah, I know this is a long video, but that's just been my journey with my faith, and let me hear you guys' testimony. How has your journey with your faith been? Has it always been rocky? Has it been on the straight and narrow? Do you not have any relationship with God? Do you not believe in God? Like, I'm not here to judge. Like, I got love for everybody as long as you're a good human being. That's what for me, at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to. Are you a good human being? And so, yeah, I think I've talked enough. But I love you guys. Hope you have a great week. Happy Easter. I know it sucks that we don't nobody get to really just hop out with a latest and greatest outfits for Easter Sunday. But let's just be thankful that we get to see another day. Like I said, I love you. Hope you have a great week. And always remember to get fit.